Another episode of the Brickyard Live Show, going over all the games that transpired in Week 12 around the NFL. We had a Jameis Winston historic snow game. We had the Lions continuously rolling, running backs thriving in their new environments, and the other teams floundering in the midst of it. But we were treated to one of the greatest Thursday night games of all time this past Thursday here. We had a classic AFC North matchup between the Steelers, who were riding high, against the Browns, whose season's all but lost. And in the shadows emerges the hero that Cleveland has always wanted, which was Jameis Winston. Having a Jameis Winston game, beating the Steelers 24-19 in an absolute classic Thursday night game. What a game this was.
Yeah, no, what a game this was. There was all of the drama and there's a lot of tension building up before this game. And it kind of felt like you were in a movie when it came to this game, just with the lead up. If you were watching the pregame, you're getting hyped. You hear the reports of snow, and then you start to see the little specks of it spinning. You see Richard Sherman shivering. You see, and people getting the tension on the broadcast. And then it shifts over to a pregame interview. And then what do we learn in this pregame interview is that the horses prepare for battle, but victory comes from the Lord, per Jameis Winston. And that is exactly what happened in this game, where you had the Steelers trying to mix and match now at quarterback with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields here, where now it seems like Justin Fields is starting to accept a role where maybe we can use him in spurts similar to Taysom Hill, where it's going to be a run play, it's going to be a spark design, and that's a nice element for this Pittsburgh Steelers offense. But it just felt like this Browns team had been through so much in this at this point. The Steelers had two huge back-to-back battles where you just went up against the Commanders, you go up against the Ravens, two really close one possessions games that you battle out, and then you stumble into a snow blizzard versus a hungry Cleveland Browns team that has the Deshaun Watson drama, at least not completely out of their realm, but it's at least far enough away where you can take someone like Jameis Winston, who seems like he's taking this opportunity, having the most fun he's ever had playing football, and then after this game, just getting everyone on the broadcast to do snow angels with him after the game. And this is the great thing about football, is this is an 8-2 team versus a 2-8 team, and with the NFL you still get a classic game out of it, which is why it's the best league in sports. Like, how often are you going to see this scenario play out in an NBA game and a hockey game? You won't, because the element of snow can be an equalizer. Division rivalries can be an equalizer. So a record where you look at an 8-2 team versus a 2-8 team, sometimes that can all be neutralized just with a little bit of snow.
And a little bit of magic as well. We saw Jameis Winston. It's one of those games that if you look at the stat line, it doesn't really tell the full story. The Steelers, for the most part, had control, or I'm sorry, the Browns had control for most of the game. And then you saw the momentum go back to Pittsburgh. They're playing well. You start to see them get back into rhythm. And then it comes down to a late game Nick Chubb score. Poetic after what we saw from Nick Chubb, and obviously everything that happened to him last year with the injury that he came up with, coming back, getting his legs under him again, having some important runs in this game. And then again, it's the magic of Jameis Winston, a guy who's obviously bounced around the league, first overall pick, who didn't really pan out in Tampa, didn't really pan out in New Orleans, and then coming home to Cleveland and playing a pretty decent game overall. There was definitely some heart attacks for Browns fans throughout, but for them to get a win against a division rival, a team that has been somewhat of their kryptonite their entire legacy, for them to be able to beat the Steelers in this game, it's just such a massive win for a team who's gone through so much with Deshaun Watson. They've had other lumps and bruises along the way this season. It's what the NFL is great with doing. You've touched on a couple of the points, but for a team like the Browns to have this Thursday night game, will it change their season? Probably not. But for them to win this game the way they do is just, it's why we watch the games.
Yeah, no, it is why we watch the games. And especially with this, it's like one of the most entertaining games where you can't just go into an NFL game thinking that you know the outcome, because typically that's not really going to be the case. And this was a really entertaining game. And it was similar to maybe another one of the most entertaining games of the week. And that was a lot of people had this circled as a blowout. This was a game where we're like, I don't know. I think they'll come out and surprise the Kansas City Chiefs. I think this will be a closer game than maybe it should be. And just because the Chiefs have played every single game close this year, and that was the Panthers and the Kansas City Chiefs potentially putting up one of the most entertaining games out of the week, where you have Bryce Young learns that football, you want to throw the ball forward. It's not rugby where we're throwing the ball backwards or lateral the whole time. This is a game where we need to push the ball down the field. And now the Panthers, Dave Canales has brought this team to life, actually, where they never looked this entertaining and this watchable. And I feel like Dave Canales does deserve a lot of credit because he's not working with much. He's working with a dysfunctional owner here. He's working with a quarterback who was broken at the beginning of the season, and now him being benched for Andy Dalton, and suddenly he's come back and he looks a little fixed. Like he looks like you see some flashes with Bryce Young. And they're like, okay, I can see why maybe he would be maybe not a number one pick, but this looks like a great second or third round quarterback that can make an impact if he has the right roster and situation around him. So I feel like Dave Canales is doing the best he can. Maybe he's fighting a fire in an apartment building with a small garden hose, but at least he's putting out a little bit of the fire and he looks good doing it.
Yeah. I mean, beginning of the season, through 6 games, Bryce Young threw a little under 300 yards. He was throwing backwards, he was throwing it to the other team. And since he got benched, we're looking at 6 touchdowns to no interceptions. He's played clean. He looks a lot more confident too. I feel like the
Mhm.
worst thing that could have happened. And now at this point, he's like, well, I don't know how much longer I'll be in Carolina. I'm playing for my second opportunity. And I think he's played good enough for the Panthers to consider maybe we run it back with Bryce Young. We get weapons around him, get an offensive line around him. I don't think his career is completely shot in Carolina if they decide to bring him back. So a lot of excitement there. Bryce Young made some great throws in this game. He split up the Kansas City defense, which is top 10 in the league. And then, just kind of like how Kansas City's been playing all season, kind of play with their food a little bit, but still find a way to win. So overall, not really concerned about the Chiefs overall, but great win for Bryce Young, and playing the way he did, and Kansas City doing what they do. But does this worry you at all for the Chiefs because of how they've played? They didn't play great against this Carolina team. They've played a lot of close games. Does this change your sentiment on the Chiefs at all after they play so closely against Carolina and nearly lose? Or is this just a team playing with their food?
No, I mean, this is a team that lost to the Colts a couple of years ago when the Colts were not that good. And like sometimes good teams, you just have an off day in the NFL. In the NFL, anybody, you can beat anyone on any given Sunday. And when you look at the AFC, every team has a flaw. And their biggest competition is the Ravens. And the Ravens' biggest flaw right now is their secondary. And we can talk about that game next if you want. But like the Chiefs can expose pretty much every other team's fatal flaw, and there doesn't look like a definitive team in the AFC that I can confidently say today would beat the Kansas City Chiefs. You could argue the Ravens, but after the Ravens, like who are you really arguing that's going to beat this Kansas City Chiefs team? Like the Bills, okay, I've never seen that before, and Patrick Mahomes has owned Josh Allen in the playoffs, and they have had success in the regular season, but I still have questions about Sean McDermott. Here's like with the Chiefs, it's like, okay, if you want to be worried about them, tell me who they need to be worried about. Like, who?
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it. Like maybe the Ravens, maybe the Bills, but other than that, and those are teams that are probably going to face each other before they face the Chiefs. And by the time they get out of that battle, they might not be the same. So I'm not overall worried with the Chiefs. I don't know if I'm super confident that they're going to three-peat, mostly because that's another thing that we've never seen done before. But this team has proven it so many times that they can do it and overcome adversity. They said that when they got rid of Tyreek Hill, that they weren't going to be good anymore. They were going to fall off a cliff. They said last year they had the worst receiver core they weren't going to win, and they did. I've learned not to doubt the Chiefs, and I'm not doubting them anymore either. So I think they'll be fine. And Patrick Mahomes, also a guy that everyone said was a bottom 10 quarterback this season, threw for 3 touchdowns, QBR 120, get him back into rhythm. Like, I'm not worried about it. This happens.
Also, it's like there's been more worry about the Chiefs than I feel like the Packers had with Aaron Rodgers. Like the amount of we had to hear this is the most talented thrower of the football of all time. Look out for the Green Bay Packers. The Packers are my Super Bowl dark horse team. Not are you worried about the Packers getting to the playoffs? It's like this is a team that won one Super Bowl. The Chiefs have won three Super Bowls. They won back to back, and it's like, are you worried they might not do something that no one else in the NFL has ever done in the history of the sport? Like, wow, they might not make history and be one of the greatest teams ever. That's crazy because that's incredibly hard to do. But will they make the conference championship? And should that be the bar? Yeah. Am I worried about that? No. And do I think if they don't win the Super Bowl, they'll win it next year? Yeah. It's like, what standard are we like? Are you worried about the Chiefs? Like, okay, if they don't win the Super Bowl this year, it's like, okay, yeah, no one else has ever done that. And it's ridiculously hard to do that. But there's still no team that you can legitimately point to and be like, this is a team that the Chiefs can't compete with because they don't exist.
Yeah, and not only that, they're also going to get Pacheco back this week, who's going to obviously help the run game. Keep in mind the fact that Kareem Hunt has filled in greatly for them. So has Carson Steele, a guy that they just picked up off the street and plugged in, and he did fine. So still feel like it's not like they're poorly run. It's not like they have a bad quarterback. It's not like their defense is playing like shit. Like, everyone's functioning well. Their offense is functioning fine. Their defense is functioning fine, and they still have Andy Reid there, so they're going to be fine overall.
Yeah, and I
Not
think
worried
it
about the Chiefs at all.
Yeah, and I think the story of the NFL would make sense if the Chiefs miss the Super Bowl this year because I think there are three a couple possible matchups in my mind right now. One would be Jameer Gibbs and David Montgomery versus Derrick Henry and just having an epic clash of like running backs going at it. Or we're probably going to see if it's not the Lions, I could confidently say it's probably going to be Saquon Barkley versus someone like Derrick Henry. And if it's not that, it'll probably be them against the Chiefs with Pacheco and Kareem Hunt. And I think the story this year has kind of been the running game, where the teams who can legitimately establish a run game have been the teams that have been consistently dominant because they've been able to lean on that. And then when you look at a team like the Giants that didn't think a run game was that important, whose 14-year-old for the general manager went up to him and he was like, "Hey, you should get rid of Daniel Jones and keep Saquon Barkley." The 14-year-old on Hard Knocks told his dad to do this, and he's like, "Haha, no, son, I know better than ye. Let me keep Daniel Jones and ship off Saquon Barkley." And he goes to Philadelphia. Everyone is pissed at this, and I feel like as soon as he did that, his job was done. And then he also destroyed Brian Dayball's job because now we talked about the Jets falling apart, and they're falling apart even more. But it's like not only the Jets are falling apart, but all of the New York teams outside of Buffalo, and they're not really New York, they're more Canada's than anyone's. But it's like, what is happening in New Jersey right now? It's like Brian Daboll is gone. The GM is gone. Now Daniel Jones is gone. And Baker Mayfield is putting up the Italian Selly on Tommy DeVito.
This is the game I told you before the show that I was excited to talk about. I was salivating at the mouth waiting to talk about this game because I have a good stat that I'm going to use in the worst top 5, but the teams that moved on from Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, and Saquon Barkley are 7 and 26 this year, and the teams that pick them up are 25 and 9. Okay? And the info for the Giants, they had 42 yards from Tyron Tracy. Tommy DeVito got some runs in, but their running game this year has been pathetic. And then the guy that you couldn't pay Saquon his $15 million he asked for because you paid Daniel Jones $160 million, which you and I had ripped apart since the beginning of that signing. We said, why on earth would you sign Daniel Jones to any money, never mind signing him to the amount that you did? just so he could be a game manager who can't throw the ball past 10 yards. That was already your first mistake. And then you let Saquon walk in free agency when you clearly had enough money to pay the guy. Saquon Barkley, by the way, who at worst is the third best running back in football. And then your backup plan for him walking was you were going to draft a rookie in the fifth round to fill in for the great Saquon Barkley, a guy who has been consistently a 1,500-yard rusher. And you fill him in also with Devin Singletary, a guy that the Bills moved on from, Texans moved on from. They didn't care. They're like, you know what? You can have him. You can have Devin Singletary. We don't care. And then your backup plan, you have Daniel Jones. You sign these guys. That fails. And then you cut Daniel Jones not even till the end of this season. Daniel Jones potentially might go in your NFC. You might face him against the Vikings. You might see him eventually come back to the NFC East potentially. What an absolute failure for the Giants. And the worst part of it all, the cherry on top is what you mentioned, the fact that they agreed to have Hard Knocks after they signed Daniel Jones and they have Saquon Barkley and they showcase to the NFL world how stupid their GM is. And the first move they're going to make is firing the head coach who won Coach of the Year, Brian Dable, who also was successful in Buffalo as an offensive coordinator. He's the problem, not the owner, not the GM, not Daniel Jones. It was the coach that's going to ultimately get fired. So the Giants, everything that they have done for them failing, they have deserved, and I hope they continue to fail. I don't at this point, I don't even know if I want them to lose the rest of the games because then they're going to get Shador Sanders. I hope they suck just enough and are just good enough to not get the quarterback they want, and they have to bank on bringing in an Aaron Rodgers or Derek Carr, somewhere where they still have a terrible quarterback situation. That is what I want for the city of New York because that is what they deserve for keeping this bozo of a GM in charge to sign Daniel Jones and let Saquon go to your rival, to go literally 90 miles down the road to go to Philadelphia and make the Eagles that much better, a team that was already so much better than you. Like, this is the most pathetic thing I've ever seen. Malpractice is what they did to poor Saquon Barkley. It is laughable. And this game was just evidence of it all the way through.
Yeah, no, it was evidence of it all the way through. And, I was like, Bucky Irving touchdown in this game, smashed that. And we got a Bucky Irving anytime touchdown in this game. And then with the Giants, it's like, remember when they hired Ben McAdoo?
Yep.
Like, this is a team known for just making the worst possible mistake. And then, you fired the GM and you fired Brian Daboll. But honestly, that's Brian Daboll's fault because his first year, knowing it was a contract year for Daniel Jones, he was arrogant enough. You talk about ego death on the show, talking about, eating some vitamins and looking at a picture bigger than yourself. Well, if Brian Daboll didn't treat Daniel Jones like he was some Josh Allen pick coming out of college who came from a school known for basketball and being like, you know what, I think I can fix him and turn him into a Josh Allen type figure. It's like, no, you should have been like, maybe we should lose all of these one possession games so I can show people I can get us in close games. Daniel Jones isn't the answer. I just need a good quarterback. If you're Brian Daboll, the worst thing that happened to you was you're kind of the one who got Daniel Jones paid because you coached him into a playoff win and then you thought you were arrogant enough that he was going to keep it up when obviously Daniel Jones played that well so he could get his money. And then as soon as he got his money, he went right back to being Daniel Jones, and him being impressive in that 1 year is still mediocre. It's still not good. It's still not transcendent. So with Brian Daboll, he also embodied part of the stench. And when you clean house, you kind of just got to get rid of the GM and the coach. For Brian Daboll, sorry, you just haven't earned the cachet to be like, I'm a coach that should stay through a rebuild and a new regime. Like, no, you haven't earned that yet. You're not a household name like a Mike Vrabel who can rebuild with the team, like a Belichick here. You're not a Kyle Shanahan. You're not a Sean McVay. Like, you haven't earned that really. What have you really done? You've gotten to the playoffs once and won a playoff game. That can be a fluke. And now that people have more tape on you, you're an offensive head coach and your defense is the strength of your team. Like, okay, at some point, that's on you, buddy. And you should have had some major input and been like, I know he had a great year this year, but maybe we shouldn't pay this guy and maybe we should look elsewhere. Because literally anyone who can throw past 10 yards is going to be better than him. So I do think, like, if we're cleaning house, like, unfortunately, Brian Dayball did have to go, and it made sense that he got fired.
Yeah. And I think Brian Dayball will get a head coaching job again. I think he's a fine head coach, but the Giants, like you nailed it. Like Daniel Jones has a year where he throws for 15 touchdowns, which is something that Lamar Jackson can do in a single month. Hell, maybe even a 3-game stretch, or Patrick
Mhm.
Mahomes or Josh Allen. This is a guy who averaged a touchdown a game, and they're like, that's our guy. That's the guy that's going to be the face of our franchise for the next 4 years. They deserve everything. And now, even better, the one bright spot of this offense this year has been Malik Neighbors. And now even Malik Neighbors is like, dog, I hate it here. Quarterback was not the problem. The problem is that our coach is an idiot and our GM is an idiot and our owner is an idiot. And I hate being in New York because New York fucking sucks. That
He's
is
not in
where
New
we're at
York.
now.
He's
Yeah,
not,
East
though.
Rutherford. Sorry. There's a bridge between them and New York. My bad. But like you have Malik Neighbors, who's the only bright spot of your offense, and he's pissed now. You have Tommy DeVito, which, hey, he was a great story last year. Not that his numbers were that impressive, but he resembles the delusional, ridiculous New Jersey Giants team that they've become. But good God, this is a team that is, I like. It's honestly a battle at this point. Who's more pathetic, the Jets or the Giants? And right now, this week alone, it goes to the Giants simply because the Jets just had a week off of embarrassment, somewhat.
No, it does not go to the Giants. Are you kidding me? Because
This is a real debate.
the Jets, okay, hear me out. The Jets, you have Aaron Rodgers here. And now I said going into the bye week, a bombshell was going to drop for the Jets because of my inside sources, right? No, I just have spider senses, and every single time they're right. Like I talked about running backs being the story this season, and then suddenly you throw out Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, and Saquon Barkley, and the records of teams who let them go, and teams who have them now. Not only with that, but I'm like, a bombshell's going to drop with the Jets, and now Aaron Rodgers is considering playing next season, but probably not for the Jets because word got out that they tried to bench them earlier in the season. And it was like, what? You tried to bench Aaron Rodgers for who? And not only that, firing your GM now in the middle of the season. You fire your head coach when you're a game back from the top of your division, which would really be the standard. And, you're not necessarily more talented than the Buffalo Bills. And you can argue for sure that Josh Allen is better than Aaron Rodgers, and maybe you should be like second in your division and a wild card. We've seen weirder things happen. You just need to make the playoffs because guess what? You're the pathetic New York Jets, but your owner goes out there talking now that you have Aaron Rodgers on your team that we should bench him for a freaking nobody that no one will ever know again. He's like, bring in Nate Peterman, apparently. Like, what? Jeff Driscoll instead of Aaron Rodgers? Is that what we're talking about right now? Bring in Tyrod Taylor. And then now, apparently, Aaron Rodgers might not play for the New York Jets last year. When you're talking about the Giants, this is a team that had, Daniel Jones has hired people like Ben McAdoo, but the Jets had their guy and they were close. And then suddenly they're like, a 40-year-old coming off an Achilles injury seems like a good idea to start over at head coach and GM. Like, you think you should have thought of that when you signed him instead if this wasn't the direction, not in the middle of the season. Then you're like, Nathaniel Hackett was the worst modern NFL head coach outside of Urban Meyer. I would rather play for someone like, God bless his soul, who is the gentleman who coached the Cleveland Browns to two of the worst seasons ever. I'm blanking on
Hugh
his name right
Jackson.
now. Yeah, but I would rather play for Hugh Jackson. He's a little more wholesome here. And then you completely botched that situation. And now it looks like Aaron Rodgers probably is not going to be a Jets. And Aaron Rodgers, little petty, little spiteful. We were talking about Kendrick before the show. He is someone who's like, okay, I'm probably not going to play this, play for the Jets next year, and I'm going to play you out of a top draft pick and pull some nostalgia out of my butt just so I make sure I burn the house down on my way out. Like, what are we talking about? You had your guy.
You traded a second round pick for Aaron Rodgers, and it has been a complete disaster. But again, the Giants signed the wrong guy. They signed Daniel Jones, which we talked about his numbers. You could have kept Saquon and drafted a rookie quarterback because they had the ability to draft whether it was there was other quarterbacks available, or they could have traded up because they had plenty of draft capital where they could have maybe swapped and they could have gotten a Jaden Daniels, which, by the way, the GM's son recommended they did so, or get a Drake May. They didn't do either of those things. Instead, they just sat on their hands and took Malik Neighbors, who will be a fine asset to their future rookie quarterback. But good Lord, the city of New York, or the city of East Rutherford, I should say, absolutely in shambles. Giants also completely embarrassed again at home, 0-6 at home. Their offense is terrible. Their defense has given up on them. Tyron Tracy's a fine story. He's not getting it done. He's not Saquon Barkley, that's for sure. Just if you want to have a real debate at a bar, just ask which New York team is more pathetic at this point, because I feel like it really is a genuine argument on who's more embarrassing. Jets maybe because they had higher standards. Like we didn't expect the Giants to be good this year. We knew they were going to suck, but both teams have still found a way to just be even worse than we expected.
Yeah. I would moderate a debate between a Jets fan or a Giants fan. Like, if you're in the comments, if you're watching this on a short, you're watching us live or after the fact right now, um, let us know. And that's definitely something I'll host. If you guys want to argue why your team is more pathetic, I'll definitely
I
hear
will
you
say,
out there.
I will say, we are setting up for history to repeat itself. You think about it, 16 years with the Packers, goes to the Jets, complete terrible season. He's
Not
going to
the
Minnesota,
Browns.
man. He's going to the
Minnesota.
Vikings. Yes,
No, we
that's
got
exactly
JJ
what Brett
McCarthy
Favre did.
coming back.
You don't think they would sell a one season with JJ McCarthy for Aaron Rodgers? I don't know whether or not they actually do it, but if you're going to fulfill NFL destiny, put him to the Vikings. You put Aaron Rodgers on the Vikings, I think that they can make the NFC title game with that. They have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson and Aaron
Yeah.
Jones.
Yeah, we'll see. I could see it. Maybe if like Dak is hurt again next year, maybe he goes for the Cowboys for a year. Who knows?
Yeah,
I still
maybe.
don't know where he would go. Maybe Jacksonville. And they're like, yeah, we're done with this Trevor thing. Let's try Aaron.
I think
I
it's
just don't know
ultimately going
where
to
he'd
be.
want to live.
I think it's going to come down to who misses out on the three big quarterbacks coming out of the draft. So it's going to be like maybe the Saints get done with Derek Carr. They bring in Aaron Rodgers to, I don't know, continue being average, I guess. But I am interested to see. I think he has to go back to the NFC because why would you want to face Mahomes, Allen, Lamar, CJ Stroud, Joe Burrow? Like, why would you want to face those guys? Even just going to the Jets, it made no sense. But I would much rather face Jared Goff, Jaden Daniels, Dak Prescott, Brock Purdy all day
Yeah.
over any of those guys.
Ian, speaking of Jared Goff and the Lions, not too much to talk about in this game. Kind of a easy game for the Lions. They struggled a little bit versus the Colts defense, but seemed like they cruised to a win here. I know you haven't been overly impressed with the Colts defense, but they gave the Lions at least a little bit of trouble here. Seems like the Lions got tested a little bit, and it seemed like one of those games where they've kind of just been used to running everybody over. And maybe they weren't as prepared as they could have been versus the Indianapolis Colts. And then Anthony Richardson was Superman. It's one thing to be Superman versus the Jets, but when you face the Detroit Lions, like, okay, same as when Anthony Richardson played well the first 2 weeks of the season, played well his first 2 weeks back, and now we're back to 11 for 28. That is insane. 11 for 28. I feel like Bugs have a higher accuracy of hitting like one of those zap lights than Anthony Richardson does of completing passes. And now you get Michael Pittman the ball and feed him, but like no touchdowns thrown in this game, and then you have 10 rushing attempts on top of that for 61 yards. And when he rushes the ball, it still feels forced. So I don't think like benching Anthony Richardson, as crazy as it is to say, I feel like Bryce Young has come back looking better than Anthony Richardson has after being benched this
for
year,
sure.
which is wild to say. And they're in the same draft, and we're comparing you to your peers. And CJ Stroud hasn't looked like himself, but he's definitely the better of those three quarterbacks right now. But like 6 touchdowns, no interceptions. Would the Colts take that? Would the Colts take Bryce Young at this point over Anthony Richardson? It's crazy. We're even floating that up there, especially with the talent this guy has.
He's got all the talent in the world. The problem is that he can't complete a fucking pass at this point. And the problem is that he just wants to run it. At this point, I think it's safe to say that he's closer to Tim Tebow than he is to Cam Newton. I don't want to hear the Cam Newton comparison. I get he's taller and he's stockier, but I mean, tell me I'm wrong.
No, you're
When you
not.
looked at Tim Tebow's stats, because Tim Tebow's stats would be he completed 40% of his passes. He had a lucky touchdown at the end of the game, usually played well in the fourth quarter, and he'd run the ball 15 times for, 100 yards. He's closer to Tim Tebow than he is to Cam Newton. I understand the talent, but he also played at fucking Florida, played for the Gators, and he kind of struggled a little bit in Florida too. He was a project. Maybe he should have sat behind Joe Flacco this year and got more reps under him because he does seem like he's a little raw. And again, like you're completing 30% of your passes and you're not doing very well on third down, and your offense, you have player. It's not like you don't have talent on your offense. Like you have Jonathan Taylor, who's a top 5 running back at sometimes. You have Michael Pittman, who's a fine receiver. Josh Downs is a nice receiver too. You have talent. And the fact that you threw the ball to Josh Downs 7 times and he caught it 3 times because all the balls were over his head or out of bounds. Like, give me a fucking break. At this point, I stand by it. I think I don't know if I can say he's a bust quite yet because I feel like he just hasn't played enough games yet. But if he's going to be completing less than half of his throws and he's just going to be running the ball every other play, I don't want him as my starting quarterback at this point.
Yeah, no. And the crazy thing is, like, you're looking at a guy who, throughout his career in Marcus Smart, is a 31% NBA 3-point shooter, and you can't complete more passes than him? Like, he's a bad 3-point shooter for the NBA, and your completion percentage is worse than someone that like Marcus Smart's 3-point percentage, probably worse than Russell Westbrook. And this is a 3-point percentage. I mean, my God, Steph Curry has a better chance of making a three than you do of completing a pass. Like, this is absolutely insane stuff here. Like, should be like how often you make layups to completing passes here. And then you have NBA players with better 3-point percentages than you do completing a pass in the NFL, which as a quarterback is your first and most important job. If you want to be an athlete, great, go be Taysom Hill. But now you're just kind of Tim Tebow without God at this point, without the prayer, without the kneeling in the end zone. Um, yeah, and it's not like you're having these epic rallies at the end of the game. You had the Jets game, but for the most part, it's just 6 points versus the Detroit Lions without their two best defenders on the field. Really? That's all you could do?
I have the stats in front of me comparing his numbers to Tim Tebow because Anthony Richardson is 6-6 in his career with 8 touchdowns, 8 picks, QBR of 72, and he has rushed for about 40 yards a game. Tim Tebow was 8-6, 17-9, QBR of 75, completion rating around 47%, and he rushed for about 30 yards a game. So is it crazy to say that? I understand the eye test. Like, I understand Anthony Richardson has a better overall talent than Tim Tebow, but Tim Tebow has a higher completion rating, has a higher winning percentage, has more touchdowns as well. Like, I think he's going to, I don't want him to be Tim Tebow, but it looks like he's on the path to being so because this year he's completing 47% of his passes, just like Tim Tebow. Is he going down the Tim Tebow route? Comment section can
Yeah.
decide, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of like if Tim Tebow was a Scientologist.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if Cam Newton switched powers with Tim Tebow. That's basically where we're at
That's crazy
in this
though. I
world.
bet we're the first I bet we're the first show to find this. Like someone a year from now is gonna be like, actually, if you look at his stats compared to Tebow, and we'll be like, see, when we talked about that a year before, this is why you need to watch this show instead of ESPN, which is regurgitated baby food for boomers or airports. That's really who's watching ESPN, the airport.
Yeah, it's the airport people who are just trying to get a cold one in. But yeah, I mean, that being said, the Lions, though, they've won 9 straight. They are the best team in football. And even if they have a game like this where their offense doesn't move the ball like it does, you still have Jameer Gibbs with 2 touchdowns. You still have David Montgomery, the two-headed monster there. Sam Laporta is going to get involved. Amon Ra is going to get involved. And their defense held the Colts to 6 points, which probably wasn't too hard when the quarterback behind you is completing 30% of his passes.
Yeah, no. And it's tough. And what else is tough when you look at another quarterback from that draft class? I'm talking about Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson. Then we go to potentially the game of the week. I mean, the Tennessee Titans coming out and winning 32-27 versus the Houston Texans. And you're like, speaking of blow, I was like, I don't know. I feel like this will be a close game, right? Like, I don't know if I'd pick the Titans to win, but I think this will be a fun, high scoring game just since I didn't love how the Texans performed versus the Cowboys. And my God, we got the former porn star Will Levis coming out here throwing for 278 yards, 15 yards a pass. Do you like that? Yeah, I like that. And then he has 2 touchdowns to 1 interception. Okay. I know I'm going to get 1 interception from Will Levis. I just don't want to see a second, a third, a fourth, and then a fumble mixed in there. If he can limit his turnovers to like one, you can live with that a little bit. And then Tony Pollard having a breakout game of the season where it seems like this is probably going to be his best game where he turned back the clock and then he goes, you know, 24 carries for 119 yards. He hit that first down average where he hit 5 yards a carry. So you can give him the ball twice and then you're going to pick up a first down here. And then Calvin Ridley and Will Levis have really been hitting their stride, especially like taking D Hop out of the equation. Seems like it's made Will Levis a little bit more focused here. So I like what I saw from the Tennessee Titans. I think part of it is a division rivalry, and then part of it is just the Texans being a kind of a disappointment this year. Where you look at CJ Stroud, he's struggled over the past few weeks, pretty much the entire season here, and now he has 2 interceptions. And I feel like a lot of teams now have the right to look back and feel justified not hiring Bobby Slowick because we talk about the Cliff Kingsbury slump. Seems like Bobby Slowick also has hit a slump where people are figuring out what the offense is doing. It really took them till the middle of the season last year to hit their stride with the offense. And typically, once the team hits their stride, you can take that 8 game window. That's where defensive coordinators are really going to look at it and dice you up. And can you adjust to that? And so far, the Texans haven't been able to do that. You know why? Because they can't score in the second half when teams make adjustments. It's crazy.
Now, do you think that speaks more to CJ Stroud, or do you think, are you still confident that D'Amico Ryans might be the guy for the Texans? I was super high on the Texans entering the season. I thought that they were going to be in the mix for the AFC title game, which now I'm definitely not on that boat. But it just seems like for the Texans this year, like they went out and they got Stephon Diggs. Obviously, he got hurt. Nico Collins was banged up for a little bit, but Nico Collins was back in this game. He connected on a touchdown with CJ Stroud. But for them, it feels like the lifeblood of this offense is Joe Mixon, which is somebody who I know that he's obviously a very good running back, but the fact that you're running your game through Joe Mixon, who has already had 7, 8 years of running on his legs, and I don't think you should be relying on Joe Mixon to be your offense when you have a CJ Stroud who was offensive rookie of the year. You have Nico Collins, hell, even Tank Dell's a nice receiver too. I just don't understand what's going on here. Is Daniil Hunter not standing up? Like, why the defense hasn't been playing very great? Why CJ Stroud's been struggling? I don't know if it's the coaching. I don't know if it's CJ Stroud. Maybe the fame got to his head a little bit, sophomore slump. But this Texans team is just super disappointing this year.
Yeah, it's disappointing this year, and they just don't have the right vibe of this team. Like something just like feels off with this team. And they're also kind of cursed right now because they're in a bad division. So you are probably gonna win your division unless something catastrophic happens this year. But I can't see the Titans or the Colts stepping up to win the division this year just with how dysfunctional they've been. So that's also kind of a curse where you're a team that already like, okay, we got our spot secured in the playoffs. We're gonna have a home playoff game. Are we gonna get the 1 seed? No. Um Probably not. So really you have no one on your heels. So you have no one like really giving you that competitive sense where you feel like you need to win these games or you could potentially miss the playoffs, which is I think one thing that can contribute to the Texans complacency. And I think another thing is just the offense being able to make adjustments. And people are like, oh well, the Texans, they didn't spend enough money or address the offensive line this year. Okay, like, okay, does that excuse CJ Stroud missing wide open receivers in the end zone? Then when he does realize they're there, he throws an interception. Like, no, it doesn't. Because when you have time to find someone wide open and miss them, so you throw a pass that's late and then it gets an interception, now you're having turnovers consistently every game. Like, I've seen Joe Burrow year in and year out. He's been sacked more times than Andrew Luck consistently has bad offensive lines. Has that stopped the Bengals in the past? No, they were able to get to a Super Bowl with it. So it's like, yeah, sure. Part of it is the offensive line, but part of it is CJ Stroud and Bobby Slowick just making those adjustments. And I feel like with Stroud, like when he went up to Caleb Williams, like, yeah, that's cool. Like CJ Stroud's been getting better, but the fact that ever since he went up to Caleb Williams on Sunday Night Football and been like, yeah, keep your head above water. It gets better from here. And then he keeps talking about how he's getting better every week. It's like, okay, maybe he is, and I just can't see it, but like it's not translating to wins. And the Texans really just they haven't dominated anybody this season for like a complete game where you can point to where you're like, oh, that's a signature win for them. Even the Bills game, like they struggle to score in the second half, and a lot of that is being able to make adjustments here. And what I've seen is other teams are able to just blow them out. So if you go to the playoffs this year and then you just get knocked out and go out on a whimper, like that's a huge problem. So you have to give this team like another year of grace. But if you have that happen again next year where we can't get past the first round or you look like this, like that's when we need to start talking about, okay, is D'Amico Ryan's the right head coach and is Bobby Slowick the right coordinator for this team?
Now, do you still think Bobby Slowick can get a job somewhere? Because I feel like his name is still buzzworthy enough that you could see a team go after them. Maybe it's a team like the Bears who are probably going to go in the offensive coordinator direction. Is that something where like I feel like that he can still get a job somewhere? I just don't know if he's going to be in as high demand because I feel like anybody would have want to sign Bobby Slowick last year and he just declined because he felt he was building something more here. But at this
I
point, like I'd much rather have Ben Johnson.
Yeah, for sure. Ben Johnson's the best offensive coordinator in the NFL, and it's not that close, unless we're talking about like head coaches. But with the thing with Bobby Slowick is he probably will get hired by one of these lower tier teams who's just desperate for an offensive head coach. Similarly to Dave Canales last year, where I think he's probably a better leader at this point. He's more of a grown up than Bobby Slowick, but like the Buccaneers offense was still like I believe they were like the 20th offense or the 15th offense in the league last year, and he got the head coaching job. So I think he's gonna be able to take a job. But if I was him, like if you believe in yourself, turn this offense around so you can actually pick where you can go, like Ben Johnson is going to be able to do. And if Ben Johnson can stay an extra year, 2 or 3 past when he could have gotten a head coaching job, I don't really think he's ready to be a head coach right now. I think he's a little too young.
Yeah, because Bobby Slowick's what, like 34? He's super young.
Hmm.
He's been in
I
the
think it'd
league
be a
for a while.
Sirianni situation.
Yeah, it'd be a Sirianni situation. But yeah, it's unfortunate to see the Texans fall the way they have in the way that they've done so. But another team that has fallen quite a bit, a team that just keeps breaking the heart of their fans. We'll go to the quarterbacks of this year. Caleb Williams and the Bears. They struggle in the first half, barely muster up any points. Then they have this absolutely absurd comeback. We're like, holy shit, the Bears are back. Caleb Williams plays another pretty good game. Looks like they're about to beat the Vikings. And then in historic fashion, they get yet another heartbreak. They go to overtime, and the Vikings just rip the heart right out of the chest of the Bears. Um, and the Vikings are now 9-2, just right on the doorsteps of potentially the one seed. Somehow, some way, um, Sam Darnold plays a fine game. Everyone but Justin Jefferson kind of gets it going. T.J. Hawkinson comes back, has a big game. Jordan Addison has a huge game. Now, for me, like in this game, I see Caleb Williams. He has a good game. He pushes the ball down the field. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen have huge games, but again, the Bears rip the heart out of the souls of Chicago Bears fans. And I don't even know how to grasp it at this point. At this point, are they just doing this to hurt them intentionally or what? I don't even know.
Yeah. So with the Bears, like the huge problem is Caleb Williams is a rookie and he threw the ball 47 times in this game. That shouldn't happen. Your leading rusher in this game. Oh, also Caleb Williams rushed the ball 6 times and he's your leading rusher in that game. Like, you don't think that's a problem? We're like, maybe we shouldn't come into the season with D Swift because as soon as November pops around, you call D Swift into a meeting, you sit down to meet with him, and then he's not there because he doesn't show up in the second half of the season, and then you have issues with your offensive line. I mean, Caleb Williams in this game struggled in the first half, but some of the ridiculous throws he was making, bringing them back in this game, and then you recover an onside kick in this game. Like, no one recovers an onside kick. It's just something that doesn't happen, especially now that you have to announce you're doing an onside kick. And then Caleb Williams throws a strike down the field. Him and DJ Moore were connecting in this game. And Keenan Allen, Cole Kmet also getting 7 catches for 64 yards. Can't forget about the luxury there. But like this team, if they get a dangerous running game and an offensive minded head coach, like, okay, I can definitely see the Bears being good. And I think this will be a good learning experience for Caleb Williams where he's coming into the league. Everyone's saying he's Patrick Mahomes, but he's gotten humbled a little bit this season, and it's going to give him motivation into the offseason because we have seen flashes of Caleb Williams this season, and people are writing him off. Like, he's a rookie in a dysfunctional situation with kind of a B- head coach who doesn't really know how to pick offensive coordinators, is a good defensive head coach, but his head coach is kind of the Arthur Smith of defense right now. Not a great situation to be in if you're Caleb Williams. So I think, that receiver and the tight end talent is there. But now, if we can add a dynamic run game to go along with it, which, every other team in your division has, because you look at the Vikings, like, what was the difference? Then you said Sam Darnold played a fine game. It's like Sam Darnold threw for 330 yards in this game. Like, for Sam Darnold, that's incredible. This is a guy you're like, okay, throw for 20, for like 24, please. Throw for 180 yards, maybe 2 touchdowns, and don't turn the ball over. And that's a good game for Sam Darnold. But for Sam Darnold to throw for over 330 yards and 9 of them going to Justin Jefferson. Last week I said Jordan Addison, free him. And that's exactly what happened in this game. TJ Hawkinson is getting in the swing, and now Aaron Jones runs for 106 yards, and the Vikings have been pushed the past few weeks. They kind of fell into a little bit of slump, and now you go head to head with a division rival and you come out on top in overtime. I think this is a good comeback for the Bears, and I think this is also a great win for the Vikings for being able to take control of this game.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the Vikings, I feel like had control for a majority of the game. Kind of slipped away in the fourth quarter. Got me a little nervous, but overall, like you talk about the big difference between the Bears and the rest of the division. The difference is the Lions, when they didn't need a running back, went out and drafted Jameer Gibbs and obviously signed David Montgomery. The Packers, they didn't need a running back. They had Aaron Jones. They went out and signed Josh Jacobs, and he's been an addition for them. And then the Vikings, they had fucking Alexander Matson as their running back. They move on from him. They sign Aaron Jones. Everybody in that division knows how to run the football, and they all have weapons. The Bears are close, but they're not there yet. And it's unfortunate. I do think that the person that takes over the Bears has the most potential for a team that seems like their defense
Yeah.
is already pretty good. They already have a good enough offense. They just need the right person there to maximize it. And so I think the Bears are close, but obviously this isn't their year.
Yeah, and I do think I have a prediction for the Bears next year that they're a defensive team and they're going to have a hard time not hiring a defensive head coach. But I think we're going to see Mike Vrabel as the Bears head coach next year, and their offensive coordinator is going to be Brian Dable.
Ooh, I'd love that.
If you're the Bears, that's
Speaking
how
into
you fix the
existence now,
team.
I love that. That's actually an amazing head coaching situation. I love that. I'm here for it. I'm on the board. I like that. Let's talk about another person from this draft class here. Absolutely. You want to talk about one of the uglier games, right? Giants take the cake for sure, but second closest is probably the Patriots and Dolphins game. I know the score says 34-15, but it might as well be 34-0. This game was just everything you'd imagine it to be. Drake May does as best as he can, but Patriots, just an absolute whimper all around.
Yeah. And then literally after the game, they're like, "All right, Gerard Mayo, what's next?" He's like, "I don't know." What do you want me to do after the game? Like, what a disaster of a hiring for the New England Patriots this year. Is like, yeah, you guys are soft because we lost to a better team. Like, most teams are better than us. Like, you don't have talent on offense. You're rolling out a rookie and Jacoby Brissett. Like, what do you really expect from this team? And then you hired. It feels like with Gerard Mayo, it's like he never really had experience. He was a linebackers coach, and now he's suddenly, expedited to be a head coach here. And it was like a weird thing in Bill Belichick's contract that if he left, that Gerard Mayo was next in line to be a head coach. And like that just seems like a mutually assured destruction clause that Bill Belichick had, where he's like, yeah, hire this guy to be your next head coach. Like, I just haven't seen enough. And with the Patriots, it's like we need to get rid of the old regime, not have another defensive head coach because the defense hasn't been the problem. It's been, the offense. But then if we bring in an outside head coach, all of Bill Belichick's proteges are out the door, and all of Robert Kraft's, buddies that he or friends he made under Bill Belichick are gone. So it seems like the Patriots are in a tough situation here, coaching wise, and I I think it'll just be tough for them to pull out of it, especially because they still haven't been able to get good receivers. And for the Dolphins, just credit to them. You went out there. It's tough to blow a team out. We talk about quarterbacks who struggle to throw touchdowns. Well, in the regular season, one thing Tua can do is get the ball in the end zone. 4 touchdowns for Tua. You blow this team out, get 34 points, and you kind of have now you look like the Dolphins again. And this team has looked like Miami of years past. It'll be tough to get into the playoffs, but can they do it? Probably. I think so. I think it'll be a tough battle, but I don't think their schedule is too difficult. It's not like you won your division last year. So, can you sneak into the playoffs and maybe be a team under the radar where maybe a team like the Bills sleeps on you and you can catch them on an off day? Maybe.
Yeah, I think it's possible. Let's look at the Dolphins' schedule coming up. They got the Packers next week for Sunday Night Football. That'll
Where
be
is
a
it?
good game. This is at Lambeau. But I mean,
That's
I think they
tough.
can beat the Packers. They can beat the
Mm,
Packers. I think the
it's
Packers are a
cold
better
now, though.
team. That's a good point. Yeah, Packers maybe they don't win, but then they face the Jets, a Texans team that we've talked about has struggled, a Niners team which has also struggled, the Browns, and then the Jets again. So I think realistically, like within the next 6 games that they have, they should win 5 of them. They should be 10 and
Yeah.
7 again, which I think, especially even if they don't make the playoffs, this season is a massive success for the fact that Tua goes down, you suck, you're one of the worst teams in the league, and then you're knocking on the door. Really, it comes down to the Broncos. If the Broncos start to struggle or they start to lose some games, then maybe realistically we can see them make the playoffs. Because I think it's the Chargers, I think, are locked in. The Ravens are locked in. Then at that point, it's the Dolphins and the
Yeah.
Broncos to fight for it. I don't trust the
Yeah.
Colts either.
Yeah, maybe maybe Tua is a type of quarterback where it seemed like he just didn't have that in him, where maybe he needed a little bit of CTE to get that dog knocked into him, and that could end up helping his career in the long run here. But everyone was talking about like, oh, Tua, please retire. Your life's gonna be over if you play football again. I'm like, do you not understand the sport you watch as grown men putting on pads trying to hit each other as hard as possible? Of course you're going to have head trauma. You have all these college athletes who are getting CTE to play for some D3 school that doesn't matter because they love playing football, and two is making millions of dollars off of it and wants to come back and potentially have generational wealth where, you have boxers who go out there and repeatedly get head trauma. No one's like, oh my God, you got knocked out in your last fight. You shouldn't go box again when you're young and in your 20s and entering your prime. It's like all like the kid gloves, like the Disney Channel, ESPN. It's like Tua's a grown up. And if a doctor said, hey, Tua, there's some life threatening trauma that if you get hit again could happen to you, Tua's like, well, no one ever had that conversation with me and decided to come back. But that was a concussion where people are like, Tua needs to retire. Where it's like, when did we like stop letting adults be adults? And what happened to, you know, you're not a doctor, so stay out of someone else's health. And like Tua's come back and thrown for multiple touchdowns the past 3 games now.
Yeah, since he's come back, he has been the last 3 games he's thrown 8 touchdowns to 1 pick, and he's played outstanding. Give credit to Tua. He's played fantastic. So I think if Tua wants to put his health on the line and make $60 million doing it and putting up the numbers he does, then by all means, I'm here for it. If he ultimately goes down the Antonio Brown arc, we'll be here to broadcast it, and it's going to be great conversation. But I think, yeah, I mean, the thing is like one thing you can't deny about Tua is that he's extremely valuable for the Dolphins. Look how bad they were without him. Granted, I know they were rolling out the Skylar Thompsons of the world, but there is something weird there where if he's not there, they're just a terrible team. They can't get Tyreek Hill the ball. Devon A Train forgets how to run. Jalen Waddle forgets how to run. But he comes back and now they've won 3 straight, and they look like they're back to being the same old Dolphins. So credit
Yeah.
to them. I think they can make the playoffs. I think I would predict them to make the playoffs, but I guess it really depends on the Broncos at this point and their schedule.
You know who's not even Tua valuable for their team to win
Who?
games and be successful? Dak. He's not even as
Very true.
valuable as Tua. That's crazy. You want to tell me that you're going to go up against a team in the Washington Commanders in your division that's kind of been on the rise here, but it seems like people are starting to figure out um, Jaden Daniels here, and we've fallen into the Cliff Kingsbury slump a little bit. We've officially hit the Cliff Kingsbury slump as we speak at this point in the middle of the season. But you can plug in Cooper Rush and get the same production that we got with Dak Prescott with your offense this year. And Rico Doidle has been playing better with Cooper Rush now, and your offense has looked better compared to the Dolphins, where it looked like they were a mess, had completely fallen apart now. Even the 49ers without Brock Purdy, even Brock Purdy is more valuable to his team than Dak Prescott. But no, let's make this guy the highest paid quarterback in the league. But with that out the window, the Cowboys and the Commanders, another insane game. I mean, I feel like every game this week, I've been like, this was one of the most entertaining games of this week. That's just because there are a lot of really entertaining games this week. And watching this Commanders and Cowboys game where you have that ridiculous Terry McLaurin touchdown here. And it seemed like the Commanders actually had a chance to come back and win the game here where they were down the whole time. And then the Cowboys end up holding them off and pulling it out because the Commanders weren't able to get it done. But another incredible game. And they really gave the Cowboys a scare. But the Cowboys, they're just one of those teams that they suck and have a chance to get a quarterback. And now I feel like they're going to beat the Giants on Thursday and play themselves out of a top draft pick because that's what actually bad teams do.
Oh yeah, no, they're gonna absolutely do that. This is a game that the Cowboys would have benefited from losing, but ultimately they win. And you're right. I mean, like 24 of 32, 247, and 2 touchdowns for Cooper Rush, a guy that we know is a backup quarterback, a guy that we've seen get exposed time in and time out before. Cooper Rush is not the guy. Rico Doidle's obviously not the answer at running back either. And they go out and win this game. They're going to win the Cowboys game against the Giants. So they're going to be 5-7, which is just going to give them a glimmer of hope, especially if they potentially beat the Bengals. They face the Panthers later on this season as well, and the Commanders again. So they could realistically be like 6-11, like what we predicted could be the case. Very possible that that happens. But yeah, I mean, the Cowboys, for how bad they've been the last 6 weeks of the season, for them to go out and beat the Commanders, a team that was flying high, a team that was good. Now they've lost 3 straight games. You want to know a good stat? This is a stat I was going to throw out for worst top five, but I'll do it anyways. The Cliff Kingsbury experience, the first 7 games of, and this includes the Cardinals and when he coached at Texas, the first 7 games, he's 45, 24, and 1. You want to know what every game the rest of the season looks like for him?
A loss.
And this is every single season, by the way. This is a Cliff Kingsbury stat. The rest of the season after week 7, he is 18-54 as a offensive-minded head coach or offensive coordinator. 18-54.
What? 18 and
That's absurd.
54 after week 7? That's crazy
Yep.
talk.
Yep.
Oh my God. Him and Dan
So it's
Quinn
not
really
just
deserve
like
each
a
other.
yeah, no kidding. You would think like Arizona, you could say like, oh, maybe it's a fluke. Maybe it's Kyler Murray. Maybe he's the problem. But in Texas, you want to know who his quarterback was at Texas? Patrick Mahomes. He had Patrick Mahomes, and that happened at Texas with the greatest quarterback of all time, arguably. Even that happened with them. So no, this is a real problem. Now, I don't know. Are they still gonna probably make the playoffs? Maybe. But I'm worried if I'm Washington. You've lost 3 straight games. Jaden Daniel has regressed. He played so great the first half of the season. He looked like the offensive rookie of the year. Now you're looking at potentially seeing Bo Nix win offensive rookie of the year, potentially Brock Bowers win offensive rookie of the year. Jaden Daniels is hurting his argument at this point. I still think he's the guy, and I think he's the best quarterback in the draft so far. But the Commanders, if they keep going the route they're going to go, they're going to have the same crash out that the Cardinals had a few years back, where they started off super hot. They were 7-1. The world was their oyster, and then they finished out 10-7 and got embarrassed by the Rams. And I feel like we're on for the same collision course with the Commanders at this point. Just
Yeah,
complete
no.
crash out.
It's crazy. Jaden Daniels somehow figured out a way to have CJ Stroud's rookie year and second year all in the same season.
Yeah. No, and it's crazy because they face the Eagles again and the Cowboys again. And I would say, like, oh, the Cowboys is a win. No, they're probably going to lose to the Cowboys. It's in Jerry World, so there's probably going to be some blinding lights, like the weekend would say. So it's not impossible for them that they lose. They have 5 games left. They got the Titans, Saints, Eagles, Falcons, and Cowboys. They're probably going to lose 3 of those games. They're probably going to finish 8-9,
Yeah.
7,
Yeah.
9-8, whatever it might be. They might not make the playoffs.
The Titans and the Saints, those aren't easy outs. Like, those are teams playing now to ruin somebody's season.
Yeah. And now Washington's the 7th seed, and right behind them is the Cardinals and Buccaneers and Rams. So they could
Yeah,
very
no.
much lose to any of those 3 teams out of
That's the
that seedings
Buccaneers
because
spot to lose.
yeah. And at this point, like, I think the Falcons are probably gonna, even if the Falcons don't win that division, I think the Bucks or the Falcons could take that spot. Packers and Vikings are stapled in as the 5 and 6 seed respectively. So Washington, they got to clean up their act now. Not only that, I didn't even talk about another guy who was a complete liability for Washington. How about their fucking kicker? I didn't realize that kickers could be born with no legs because apparently that's what Austin Seibert is. This man missed how many field goals in this game? 3 field goals? Good God.
He missed
comes
that
back
extra
from
point, too, to tie the game, right? After
Yeah,
they got the
dude.
touchdown, he missed it.
He missed 2 extra points. He makes 2 extra
Yeah.
points. How do you miss
He's
an
the
extra
reason they
point?
lost. So if he
That's a
missed 3
gimme.
field goals and 2 extra points, like, they win.
Yeah. I didn't realize that kickers could have no legs. I didn't realize that fish could be kickers at this point, but there's hope for everybody in 2024. But the Cowboys, here they go. Oh yeah, also I'll shout out another guy. Let me shout out Cavante Turpin. Nice little kickoff return touchdown. Credit to him. Another kickoff return touchdown by Mr. Jonye Thomas. Hopefully you started him in fantasy this week.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it's just the. I think we're seeing the downfall of the Commanders this season in real time.
Yeah, if I'm Dan Quinn and the offense continues to struggle, I fire Cliff Kingsbury. Like, you have all of this data on him now, and if it happens again when he's the offensive coordinator, like maybe being the head coach, like, maybe it's like a personality issue or maybe just some communication or leadership skills that he needs to grow into and acquire, because not everyone's a natural. Some people are just surgical with it on offense, and he can be. But if this is back to back years and you're just the coordinator, dude, like, okay, see ya. I'm gonna try Brian Dayball instead next year. But shout out to the Cowboys. Shout out to Cooper Rush getting it done, making Dak Prescott obsolete for the Dallas Cowboys. And then you talked about, two other teams on the heels uh, of the Commanders for the wild card this year. And what actually is going on in the NFC West? I don't know who wrote the script, because apparently the NFL is scripted if you talk to some jabronis on 4chan, but we have the Seahawks now leading the division, beating the Cardinals 16-6 after the Cardinals are coming off of a 4-game win streak, or 5-game win streak, I believe, looking like a competent team at the top of the division. The Niners are at the bottom of the division. They kind of look exactly like how we predicted they would look this season. And the Rams could not stop a paper airplane from getting through their defensive line at this point. And now Geno Smith, who was broken on the sideline versus the Bills, crying. It wasn't impressive. It wasn't pretty, but I guess they won now, and I guess now Seattle is at the top of the NFC West. And my prediction is whoever wins this division is getting obliterated in the first round, because you're probably going to play the Packers or the Vikings. And I think either any of those teams is going to get obliterated.
Yeah, obviously. No, and I knew I was worried about the Cardinals because the Cardinals, they've looked good the last month of the season so far. They've had games where they put up 30 points. Their defense has played well. And I knew that it was in the cards at some point that they were going to have a game like this where everything is hard. The last time I saw this was when they faced the Lions. And you know what? At least with the Lions game, I can say, you know what? They're the Lions. They've only lost one game this year. They're the best team in football. No problems here. But for that to happen against the Seahawks, a team that started off 3-0 and have since begun 3-5, or at this point before they played 2-5, looks like they've completely lost their wits. They've completely lost their burning passion to play football. This point in the season, I just knew that it was coming. Where something was, we're gonna have a game where everything was hard. And in this game, the running game, nowhere to be found. Marvin Harrison, nowhere to be found. Michael Wilson, nowhere to be found. Trey McBride, though, talk about a luxury. Trey McBride played a great game, but everything was hard for the Cardinals. Now, I don't think the sky is falling. I think they'll be fine. They'll bounce back. They're still in the mix for the playoffs, but it would be an injustice to the NFL if the Seahawks win the division. No offense to the Seahawks. I love Geno Smith. I love Kenneth Walker. DK Metcalf's a baller. Jackson Smith, the Jigba. But it would be an injustice to the league if the Seahawks win the division at this point. But honestly, at this point, can we just skip the NFC in general? Can we give 2 division winners to the NFC North? I think that's
Yeah.
fair. I think sometimes divine intervention is important because you have 3 great teams in the NFC North and we have 0 great teams in the NFC West. Sometimes I think there's a time that we intervene. Give the Packers the NFC West. Give the Vikings, even though they're in the Midwest, give them the division win because I don't want to see the Seahawks. The Seahawks are going to face either one of those teams and they're going to lose by 20 points. I think divine intervention is important.
Maybe. I don't know. The thing with Seattle though is I look at their defense this year, And over the past few weeks, I've kind of been like, because it seemed like it underachieved like the first part of the season, but the past few weeks their defense I feel like has been stepping up and doing what we thought they were capable of. I mean, you get a close victory versus the 49ers last week. That's kind of a huge weight off your shoulder, but their defense now, Reek Woolen and Devon Witherspoon have actually been doing what they're capable of, and holding any team in the league to 6 points is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, that's an incredible feat for them. And while their offense has taken a step back, it seems like anytime like the offense takes a step forward for Seattle, the defense takes a step back. When the defense takes a step forward, the offense takes a step back. But it seems like their defense has been improving, and we've seen that sometimes with these rookie head coaches, like with Rich Gannon last year. The Cardinals defense started to come alive at the end of the season. And we've seen that, it's kind of his specialty, and he's kind of been able to implement some strategies. And now you look up, you're at the top of your division. I feel like Seattle's defense is starting to peak. So if their offense can kind of meet them in the middle, okay, maybe you could give someone a fight in the first round, because I don't know who's probably gonna be the 2 seed in the NFC. Like, who would you face if you're the, or I
Probably the
guess
Eagles.
probably the Eagles.
Yeah, but if they win their division, they're probably going to face the Packers or Vikings, most likely.
I mean, with Sam, if you go up against Sam Darnold, I don't know.
Possible.
Can we
That's
trust
a
Sam
game I think
Darnold?
they can win. But like, if they're the seventh seed, right? Because the thing is, if the NFC West, if two teams from the NFC West make the playoffs, I'm gonna go schizo. To be completely honest, I'd much rather see Baker Mayfield, who's been shafted in several games this year, whether it's Hall of Fame Kirk Cousins or whether it's Patrick Mahomes cucking him over. The Bucks are not 5-6 in my mind. The Bucks are at least, I think they're at least 6-5, 7-5 at this point. Like they are not as bad as their record. 5-6 is disgraceful for them for how good that Baker's played. So I'd like to see the Bucks in the playoffs. I'd like to see. I know the Rams haven't played great this year. I'd like to see the Rams in the playoffs potentially, but I just the NFC West should not have two teams from that division make it when all of them are going to be 6-6 after next week. I don't want to
Yeah,
see it. The NFL doesn't want to see it. We want to see all of the NFC North teams not named the Bears. We want to see maybe we see Jaden Daniels in the playoffs, but or Baker Mayfield. That's what we want to see. Let the fans see what they want to see.
let them see it, and then something fans wanted to see, as you mentioned this guy earlier, was for Josh Jacobs to get paid. And the Green Bay Packers are like, all right, people want to see that. We feel fine doing that. And then you look at Josh Jacobs, 26 carries, 106 yards for 3 touchdowns in this game. Jordan Love didn't play his best game, but still threw for 2 touchdowns. And the Green Bay Packers, without Brock Purdy, the 49ers got absolutely wagoned. And this is a problem with Kyle Shanahan, where anytime, Brock Purdy or Jimmy Garoppolo has gone down, where people look at these guys where they're not, no one really looks at them as a top tier quarterback in the league. Um, Not even tier two. People like to hate on Brock Purdy and Jimmy Garoppolo, but when those guys are out for Kyle Shanahan, his team gets absolutely obliterated. And Jordan Love doesn't even crack 170 yards, but they dropped 38 points on you. It's like this is the best you could muster up with Debo Samuel, George Kittle, and Christian McCaffrey out there. 10 points, like that's it. It's like this is a Packers defense that's been susceptible to be had this year. This isn't an elite shutdown defense. And then this is a Packers team that has owned the 49ers in the regular season, struggled versus them in the playoffs, but like 38-10 for a team that has aspirations of getting back to the Super Bowl. Now you're sitting at the bottom of your division. I hate to say it, but we pulled one of these out at the beginning of the season, said Packers, the 49ers are missing the playoffs this year. That was our hot take coming into the season. And honestly, it's kind of panned out, because if this is what you look like without Brock Purdy, you don't deserve to make the playoffs. You don't even look like you could beat the Falcons if you matched up in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm looking at the rest of the 49ers schedule. This just felt like it was a death wish. Like this just felt like it was a nail in the coffin for the season where Everyone's been banged up. Now Brock Purdy's not playing. And I have a lot of thoughts on the game, but they have the Bills next. We have a Bears team that's hungry. We have a Dolphins team that's playing well, a Rams team that always has the Niners circled on their calendar. They have the Dolphins, the Lions, and then end the season with the Cardinals. I think they'll probably win two of those games of the six I mentioned, but they're not going to win their division. They're probably not even going to finish above 500 at this point. They're probably going to be 7-10, as we predicted, a Super Bowl hangover. And I think also this game proves to me that who's the better coach, Kyle Shanahan or Matt LaFleur? Well, let's see. Matt LaFleur had Malik Willis, who was one of the worst quarterbacks when he was in Tennessee. He goes there and he thrives. The 49ers have thrown out the Kyle Allens of the world, the Brandon Allens of the world. They've had other backup quarterbacks that have stepped in for them, and they've played terribly for them. I think the problem that I've seen with Kyle Shanahan is rather than adapting to the strength of that quarterback that's filling in for them, he just tries to run the same old system that he has with Brock Purdy. Problem is Brock Purdy's more accurate. Brock Purdy has a better arm, and he's a better game manager than Brandon Allen. And I'm not here to disrespect Brandon Allen either. Not that he cares what I have to say. But I just felt like they were trying to just run out what Brock Purdy does for them, but with a guy who is a D minus Brock Purdy, to be completely honest. So for this game, like I think the Packers are already a better team, but I also feel like they have the better head coach at this point. Matt LaFleur hasn't blown 15-point leads like Kyle Shanahan has. Matt LaFleur has won with less, and he's also proven that he can elevate a player like a Malik Willis, and he can elevate other talent. The receiver corps for the Packers. There's a lot of really nice receivers, but not a real clear number one. But on the other side, you have George Kittle, you have Debo Samuel, you have Juwan Jennings, who's played fantastic for them this year. I just feel like at this point, like not only are the 49ers done for their playoffs, but I also feel like this is a game that proves to me like Matt LaFleur is a better head coach than Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan is slightly overrated.
Yeah, I still think Matt LaFleur should at least make a Super Bowl before he put that on him because Kyle Shanahan has at least gotten to a Super Bowl twice and been an offensive coordinator on a Super Bowl offense before. And I definitely believe in the Packers and think they can make a Super Bowl, but I definitely see where you're coming from. But right now, I still would take Kyle Shanahan. But the thing is, it's like Brock Purdy is one thing, but like this happened with Jimmy Garoppolo, of all people.
Yeah.
You couldn't
Like
find a
a
replacement for Jimmy Garoppolo when he went down? Like, really? Like, "Oh, let's get CJ Beathard and we'll be fine." Like, excuse me, what? This is a team that should have had, like, Carson Wentz sitting on your bench, behind Brock Purdy.
Yeah. And there's plenty of other quarterbacks that are unemployed right now. Or also, if I'm not mistaken, Josh Dobbs was on the 49ers to start the season. Where was Josh Dobbs this game? I feel like Josh Dobbs would have been a better fit for what they try to do than a Brandon Allen. I don't know where he is playing at this point, but I would have loved to see him play. But yeah, like I just maybe it's a little hyperbole for me to say Matt LaFleur is better, but I feel like if nothing else, this season alone, Matt LaFleur has had a much better coaching job this year. I know the 49ers have had some bad luck, but Matt LaFleur is right up there, I think, with Kyle Shanahan. And I feel like over the last few years, I feel like Matt LaFleur has exceeded expectations for where they were, especially coming off of Aaron Rodgers, having Jordan Love step in. Jordan Love now looking like a top 10 quarterback in the league. The way they've succeeded with their receivers, the way they succeeded with Malik Willis, I think the argument could be made there.
You know, no, you should definitely lean into it because it's a good take. It's early and it'll get people riled up. So I definitely think you should lean into the Matt LaFleur is better than Kyle Shanahan take. And it's something that's good to be early on. And hey, man, Matt LaFleur has been cooking over the past few years. And if this was an eyebrow contest, it wouldn't even be close.
We wouldn't even be having that's not an argument there. He's got the best eyebrows in the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess we have three more games to talk about. Could stay in the NFC West and talk about the Saquon Barkley game, or we can talk about the Bo Nix game.
Um, let's go over Bo Nix. He came, he conquered, he played the Raiders. They've been terrible this year. And you know, You had again a game where he threw for 2 touchdowns. It was 273 yards, but it was like 29-19 versus the Raiders. Broncos set themselves up for success, but you beat one of the bottom four teams in the league. Congratulations. You showed up for work and did what you're supposed to do.
I do think Bo Nix played a good game though. He's played well the last 3 weeks. He's got I think 8 touchdowns to 1 interception. He's played well overall. I am curious how the offensive rookie of the year is going to look because he broke the Broncos rookie touchdown record after this game, and I feel like he started off pretty bad, was pretty average the middle half, and now this he's starting to look pretty good. So I am curious. Bo Nix, you've kind of seen his development in real time, where with Jaden Daniels, he started off super hot. Now he's starting to come back down to earth. I am really curious if at the end of the season, if the Broncos are 11-6 or 10-7, they get the playoff spot. Maybe they win a playoff game. If that's going to sway the voters and have Bo Nix win Offensive Rookie of the Year, or maybe better yet, maybe we just see like a Brock Bowers win potentially
Oh
over
my
Jaden
god.
Daniels.
I would love a Broncos Bills matchup in the first round. Give it to me.
Yeah, that'd be
Sean
a fun
Payton
game.
versus Sean McDermott. Please. Sean Payton's going to be cooking in that matchup. And the
Yeah.
Broncos defense, hey, like the Broncos defense has looked good this year. You have Pat Surtain, you have that talent you've had over the past few years, and what you've needed is just a competent offense, which you brought to this Broncos team. And Bo Nix has looked good this season. He's looked like a veteran. I want to see how it plays out with him. Because I watch him and he plays well, but like I just need him to separate himself like from someone like a Justin Herbert, where he's going to enter in that star, where he's going to be able to take his team to that next level, and you really see that massive win from him going toe to toe. And for me, it's going to take him, with most other quarterbacks, winning a playoff game. But is he going to be someone for the Broncos like a Brock Purdy, like a Tua, or like a Dak Prescott? Yeah, I can see that for sure for Bo Nix. But is he going to separate himself into the upper echelon? I mean, I feel like that remains to be seen, but I feel like he's earned enough this season where I feel like he's played better this season than Dak Prescott did his rookie year. The Broncos have looked good, and I feel like he's played similarly to like someone like a Brock Purdy or a Tua. So credit to Sean Payton and credit to Bo Nix for stepping into this league after playing 15 years in college and looking like you've played 15 years of college football.
Yeah, credit to him. I guess also for the Raiders, if I'm the Raiders at this point, a team that's already lost a bunch of games in a row, just lose out. I think at this point they know the season's over. I see a game the week 15 of the season they face the Jags. That's probably going to be for the number 1 overall pick. If I'm the Raiders, like you're not going winless, and I don't think Antonio Pierce is going anywhere. So you might as well lose out. Get your Shador Sanders, get your Cam Ward, whoever you decide to pick, and just suck because you knew going into the season, like Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, one of these guys is your quarterback. Neither of them are the answer. I think at this point, we're probably not going to see a Raiders win the rest of the season. And I don't think that's a crazy take.
Yeah, no, it's like when Jeb Bush came out and he was like, "Please clap," and the Raiders fans right now are like, please lose out. Don't be one of these bad don't be one of these actually terrible franchises, because there's a difference between a bad team and a bad franchise. A bad franchise will suck, but win games to play themselves out of draft picks. A bad team will lose all of the games they need to and get the top draft pick. Like there's a difference, like, between a bad team and a bad franchise. And if Tom Brady's there, he's like, lose all the games. I'm pretty sure that's what he's telling Mark Davis right now. So if Tom Brady finessing one of the greatest NFL deals of all time, where he doesn't have to do his job and he gets paid $250,000 for it, and now he's a 10% owner. Like, all right, maybe listen to him.
Yeah, I would listen to Tom Brady too. I would also listen to Saquon Barkley because, good God, this game is the Saquon Barkley game. This is the game that not only makes the Giants look stupid, like we've talked about time and time again this season, but this is also a game where Saquon Barkley potentially enters the MVP conversation as he now is on pace to potentially break the single season rushing record after he has 300 total yards in this game. He runs all over the LA Rams, and the Eagles cruise. They're now 9-2, not too far away from potentially being the one seed if the Lions lose another game, but massive game for Saquon Barkley. Averages 10 yards a carry in this game and also puts another 50 yards on the ground. Masterclass game from Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, no, it's a masterclass game from Saquon Barkley, and kind of the theme of this episode has been breaking down what the theme of the NFL season has been, and it is look at the top teams in the NFL. What do they all have in common? And it is the fact that they're able to run the football. We look at the Vikings, Aaron Jones, I thought was going to be a piece that was going to separate them from just being a bad team to be better than they should, and he helped elevate them versus the Bears. Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, all of these teams that can just rely on a running game, like that gives you consistency week in and week out. And for this Philadelphia Eagles team, if this was kind of the same team where we have like a D Swift type running back, like I feel like they're not as dominant or dynamic this year. And I don't feel like they're in quite the position that they be where people are talking about them as a potential team to go to the Super Bowl. And I think Saquon Barkley is the one that adds that dynamic element. So it really makes you think, okay, now we have to think about most valuable player. Well, Saquon Barkley has proven that he has been the most valuable addition to the Philadelphia Eagles this year because he's put them back into contention. This was a team that fell off a cliff last year and was really trying to find themselves, brought in two new coordinators, and then he won you the game last week with two massive runs, and then this week dominating with 255 yards, and now he's on pace to beat a record. That's typically what you need to do to win a most valuable player award, and I feel like everyone last year when Lamar won it was clamoring for a running back to win it. Now Lamar's having a really good season this year, but the Eagles have a better record. Um, and then the Ravens have a potential to not win your division. So if the Ravens um don't win their division, they're not going to be the one seed. I think Philadelphia, you can definitely make the case that like, well, would they be in this position if it wasn't for Saquon Barkley? Absolutely not. And the quarterback's always like, well, if you take the quarterback off, like, yeah, I get that, but like at the same time, he is the offense and he is the driving force of this team that has kind of put them back into position to make a run for a Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, I think so. I think outside of the Lions, they're probably the second best team in that conference. But if you think about what happened the last time somebody won the MVP that wasn't a quarterback, it was Adrian Peterson, and Adrian Peterson rushed for 2,000 yards. He had a historic season, one of the best running back seasons of all time. Now we have Saquon, where if he averages 100 yards a game for the rest of the season, you might see him actually break the all-time record. I know he has an extra game, but when you're averaging 6 yards a carry, when you're also involved in the passing attack, and then also, if we're talking about the MVP race, it's very narrative based as well, where Lamar Jackson has his two MVPs. He's obviously going down as, at worst, the second best quarterback in this league. And they have
Mhm.
Saquon, who has that giant story over him. They picked Daniel Jones over him, who is currently holding a cardboard box outside of East Rutherford, New Jersey. You have Saquon go to the Eagles, a team that obviously had their collapse last year. He comes in. If they're able to make the conference championship with him and he has the all-time single season rushing record, not only is that a victory lap for Saquon and Philadelphia and a big loss for the Giants, but the narrative there for MVP, I feel like it's going to be really hard for Saquon to not at least get MVP votes, especially after this game where they win single-handedly because Saquon just took over.
Yeah, no. And I feel like it'll be tough to give it to anyone else. Like you could give it to Jared Goff this year for quarterbacks, but outside of that, it's like, okay, potentially Josh Allen. But I feel like if it's a quarterback, it should go to the one seed, which it did last year with Lamar. And Jared Goff has been a valuable piece, and it almost feel like an accomplishment award for the Detroit Lions. So I think it would be between like Jared Goff, Saquon Barkley, and Josh Allen. At this point. But the Eagles also just like nuking the Rams out of legitimacy in the NFL. It was like if there was a game that you could point to and be like, okay, I don't think this team is the same like team that strung it together at the end of last year. Okay, the Lion so you're gonna go up against either the Lions, the Packers, the Vikings, or, the Falcons, or the Eagles in the playoffs, and you just let Saquon Barkley get 255 yards rushing. What's Bijan and Tyler Algier gonna do at a, much less level? What is the Detroit Lions with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery gonna do to you? And what are the Eagles gonna do if you face them again this season? So it's like, okay, this is a team that kind of just got nuked out of legitimacy because if you have Puka Nakua and Cooper Cup each get a touchdown, you still only have 14 points.
Yeah. And Puka Nakua had 10 catches in this game for 100 yards. Wasn't even Puka Nakua had a bad game. And Cooper Cup, he played a good game too. Both of them produced in this game. You had a Cooper Cup touchdown, and it just wasn't enough. You got 20 points out of the mix. Kyron Williams had a fine game. He had a touchdown. But again, it's like I just don't think their offense is good enough, and I think their defense is just bad at this point. Especially, I mean, Saquon Barkley's a special specimen. You see those games from them, him, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs. You see those games from the great running backs, but for the level that he had, with how bad the Rams defense has been, like they're done. I think the Rams probably don't make the playoffs at this point. I also think Stafford is getting a little bit older. They've had injuries this season, and I think they really miss Aaron Donald too. So, yeah, I think this is kind of like the nail in the coffin, just like we talked about with the Niners too. I think this is probably the nail in the coffin for the Rams season as well.
Yeah. Also, in a copycat league now, where you have like the Eagles kind of refining themselves, the 49ers refining themselves, and the Derrick Henry signing for the Ravens, do you think next offseason you're going to see all these teams just trying to sign a running back for too much money and screwing themselves over?
Yes, absolutely. If you see these three big giants that they've had, I am curious now who's going to be a free agent after this year. But um, you have Derrick Henry, who's an MVP candidate. You have Saquon Barkley, who's an MVP candidate. I don't think Josh Jacobs is an MVP candidate, but he's improved their running game significantly. And I think Aaron Jones is a great running back, but Josh Jacobs is just a little bit better. And he's definitely made the Packers offense even deadlier. So I definitely see it. I'll look at some of the potential free agents, but um,
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
I
I
definitely
think
think
in a
so.
copycat league, we always see that. And then the Lions, too, signing David Montgomery here. It doesn't look like, okay, we're going to have James Conner available next year.
I can see somebody overpaying for him,
Yeah.
even though he's a fine running back. You got Aaron Jones is up for contract. Najee potentially could be paid. Um, maybe somebody goes after Javante Williams.
Oh
I
my
wouldn't do
god.
that, but if you
Who's
want
gonna
to,
sign Najee to a bag next year? Oh my.
it's going to be a bad team, and then he's going to
The
turn into
Giants. Well, we let
oh
Saquon go.
man,
Let's pay Najee a bag.
let's pay Najee $15 million. Oh god, I can see it now. Poor Najee. He doesn't deserve that arc, but he'll have it. But last game of this week to talk about, we had the battle of the Harbaughs. Jim and John went to town. Um, in this game, we had a massive Derrick Henry game. Not quite to the level of Saquon, but 140 yards. Other side of the ball, we had Mr. No Hands himself, Quentin Johnson, 3 drops, 5 targets, 0 catches. He had a Tony Snell game. If you get the reference, like him below. But he had a Tony Snell game, Quentin Johnson. Battle of the Harbaughs, and the Ravens prevailed. They are now 8-4. Chargers. I kind of expected the Chargers to lose this game, but I still feel pretty good about the Chargers after this game, regardless. Even though I do think the Ravens had control throughout this game, but overall, I think just the Ravens are a little bit better. Derrick Henry's a better running back, but yeah, thoughts on this game about the Battle of the Harbaughs?
Yeah, Battle of the Harbaughs in this game, and I haven't been like a big Chargers fan over the past few seasons, especially with Justin Herbert here. But watching this game, I legitimately felt bad for Justin Herbert because Quentin Johnson, there's a moment they're about to come back, and it's not like just that he dropped passes. It was the specific passes he was dropping were wide open touchdowns to break the game open. I mean, the pass he dropped where he had momentum, uh, Peyton and Eli were like, "Oh my god, He just dropped a runner's pass. Herbert put him right on it. Lad McConkey was coming around for a block. It looked like that was going to blow the game open where, okay, this is going to be a competitive battle throughout the rest of the game. But no, that game turned into Quentin Johnson drops that pass that could potentially put the Chargers in scoring range to just blowing it wide open for the Ravens. And, the Chargers have been good this year, but like a game like that, you can point to it's like, okay, their receivers just aren't good enough. We have a really great two in Lad McConkey. So now go out here and shell out for someone like T. Higgins next season, even if, another receiver comes available that you can trade for. But they need to be the next team that overpays for a wide receiver. And I think the Broncos and the Chargers are going to be in a bidding war next season for T. Higgins. I think it's going to be two teams in their division paying, and it's going to be, does T. Higgins want to get taxed at California rates and play with Justin Herbert, or maybe save a little bit of money and play with Bo Nix here? But I think both those teams are going to be vying for T. Higgins next season. But this was just one of those games. So it's like Quentin Johnson remembered who he was. It's like you can fix a guy for a certain period of time, but when he was that bad for that long, it's like, can you really teach a old dog new tricks here with Quentin Johnson?
No, I think at this point, yeah, the Chargers. That's the biggest problem with the Chargers this year. Is like you hit on Lad McConkey, which you should be happy for. Lad McConkey's a very nice receiver. I think he'll continue to get better and he'll be great. But again, you guys don't have that big physical receiver. You don't have that number one. Like the Ravens have Zay Flowers. They went out, they got Deontay Johnson, and they have Rashad Bateman, who've been nice for them. But you don't even have a great tight end. Like Will Disley's fine, but he's not the answer at tight end. So really, like, go out there, bolster up your weapons, and then I think next year for the Chargers, they're going to be contenders. I think, and maybe you go after a running back too. I think J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards were they were fine additions. You needed to plug in somebody for Austin Eckler, but go out and get a legitimate running back. You're good at drafting running backs. Maybe you draft a running back with one of your higher picks. Um, but yeah, they're just not quite ready yet, and it's unfortunate. I do think they can win a playoff game, but when they face a team like the Ravens or the Chiefs or maybe even the Bills, I just don't think they're going to be able to win it out.
Yeah, no. And I could see them like, yeah, maybe you can get to the playoffs, but like for the Chargers, they beat all the teams that they should beat, and they've lost to all of the teams that they should lose to. The one outlier for that was probably the Bengals game, but the Bengals have no one to blame but themselves in that game. And record wise, how they played so far this season, the Chargers did deserve to win that game because they're like, you know what? It's September. We're playing a game in September. Maybe we should show up and try and win the game where the, Bengals are out here just singing "Wake Me Up When September Ends" every season.
Every single season, it's like that. Right now, if the Chargers season ended today, they'd face the Steelers. Do you think they can beat the Steelers potentially?
No, definitely not. They don't have enough firepower against that defense. That's a game where it's like the defense is like a threat to like blow you out in that game and blow the game wide open. And it's like I just haven't seen enough. I think your defense can make it a battle, but I'm just not confident that you're going to be able to make enough plays versus the combination of TJ Watt, Patrick Queen, and Alex Highsmith in that game. And I think your defense will be able to make it close, but I just think that's a game that the Steelers win, and they're hungrier at this point. And the Chargers, if you get to the playoffs, you're ahead of schedule in the Harbaugh era. So you're like, okay, that's a
Yeah.
victory lap.
No, for sure. I think they'll play fine. But yeah, I think the Steelers would win that too. But we previewed every game in Week 12 of the NFL season. Great week overall. Um, but there is one thing we are needing to cover before we end the show and we go into tomorrow when we preview all the games around the NFL. Of course, we talk about the best of the best on the show, but we also talk about the worst of the worst on the show. The reason why you tune in, the reason why you have a smartphone, and the reason why you tune into the Brickyard each and every week. That is, of course, the worst top five according to the Brickyard. First, I'm going to talk about teams that are not included on this list for one reason or another. Let's talk about the Panthers playing a close game against the Chiefs, tie game up until a game-winning field goal for them. Panthers, Bryce Young playing pretty good over the last 3 weeks. Panthers, you're
Yeah.
excluded from the worst top five. We like to see it.
Yay,
The
Panthers. Good job.
Titans, you're also excluded from this list. Played a close game. You beat the Texans. Will Levis looking pretty good over the last 3 weeks. Okay, Titans, you've graduated from the worst top five this week. Last but certainly not least, a team that I've dragged through the mud the last month, the Cowboys. You beat the Commanders. You beat a division rival. You might have beaten yourself out of a first overall pick, but you know what? You won a football game. So therefore, you will not be on the worst top five this week. Honorable mentions for the worst top five. How about teams that moved on from Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, and Josh Jacobs? Yes, the Titans, Giants, and Raiders. You guys are 7-26, while your people who signed your running backs are 25-9. So, for that alone, those deserve an honorable mention. Now, top five worst teams. At number five, I have the Commanders with Cliff Kingsbury. I talked about it when we talked about the Commanders game. They are 0-3 in their last three games. Cliff Kingsbury, the first half of the season, is 45-24-1. And the second half of the season, he is 18-54. This
Ugh.
is not a coincidence. This is a trend, something that you need to study, something that 30 for 30 should really pick up and discuss. Because what the hell happens? You have the best offense the first half, and now this team can't beat the Cowboys? Worst top five. Top five going to Cliff Kingsbury and the Commanders. Then we go to the Patriots. Now, Patriots, we have low expectations, but holy shit. 0 points through the first three quarters. You get two bummy touchdowns to make the game look better than it was, but you couldn't muster up 300 yards of offense. You're practically scoreless throughout the game. If it wasn't for this Hail Mary Drake May that turned into a touchdown, it wouldn't have been very close at all. Patriots, Gerard Mayo is not the guy. Get rid of Mayo. Get rid of mustard. Get rid of ketchup relish. No more condiments for the Patriots. It's time to get a real head coach for you. At number four, we have the Patriots. At number three, this is for the city of Chicago, the Chicago Bears. They played a good game. We had Caleb Williams with 350 yards. He looked like he could be the next great quarterback in this league. But the thing that I hate the most about any team in the NFL is when you break the heart of your fans. And good God, the Bears, the last month, you've lost 5 straight games, and each of these games in a heartbreaking fashion. You're getting blown out by the Vikings. You come back, you tie the game, you get an onside fucking kick, for fuck's sake. A kick, the success rate of an onside kick is like 1%, and you happen to get it, you score, you go into overtime, and then the Vikings beat you anyways. Just, you might as well just let them blow it out. The Bears, for heartbreak alone, you're number three. At number one and two, I'm going to have a New York team. And I'm going to side at number two, I have the New York Jets. Potentially releasing Aaron Rodgers, firing Robert Saleh, firing Joe Douglas. It's like as soon as this team starts to look like a potential playoff team, or in some people's eyes, a Super Bowl team, it comes crashing down. And now we have Aaron Rodgers is probably going to play for the Vikings next year to fulfill his Brett Favre arc. The Jets, they're going to go and draft the wrong quarterback in the draft. And East Rutherford, New Jersey, they will suffer with yet another terrible New York Jets teams. But it could be worse. Believe it or not, it could be worse. Because you could have had one of the greatest running backs of our generation on your team already. You could have moved on from your bad quarterback, and then ultimately you didn't. Instead, you signed Daniel Jones to $140 million. You say, Saquon, sorry, we can't afford you. We gave Daniel Jones $140 million. We can't afford to give you $14 million like you've asked. We've tagged you twice. Sorry, Saquon. Have fun. Go find your home. He says, okay, I'm going to move 90 miles downward, and I'm going to go to Philadelphia, a division rival. And I'm going to be on pace for the single season rushing yards record, potentially beating Eric Dickerson's long record. Not only that, Saquon Barkley outscores you not only in points this week, but also in yards. He is the offense for the Eagles, and they already have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. The Giants, what do you have? You have a fifth-round rookie in Tyron Tracy, who's been pretty okay, but still not very great. You have Tommy DeVito. You have a sponsorship with Jersey Mike's. Congratulations, New York. the thing that you can look upon after you let Saquon walk is you have a fifth round rookie who's running for you. You have Devin Singletary that the Bills and Texans didn't even want, a team who didn't love running the football. And then now the guy that you chose to pay over Saquon will be playing against you at some point this season, most likely, depending on where he signs. Daniel Jones will find a job somewhere else, somewhere, potentially in China. But the Giants, of all teams this week who had the biggest loss, somehow, some way, they found a way to lose not once, not twice, but three times this week. Both when they faced the Buccaneers this week, when Saquon ran all over the Rams, and now Daniel Jones getting cut and finding his new home, wherever that may be. The Giants, worst team in week 12, according to the Brickyard.
Yeah, deservedly so here in week 12. And, it's Thanksgiving, and we can all be thankful that we didn't have to watch the Jaguars play this week as well. I was like, why did we have so many good Jaguars weren't playing? That's why it was such a good week.
It wasn't like watching paint dry. It's lovely. Unfortunately, we will have to see them next week, though. They're not in London quite yet. So we will suffer.
Yeah.
But luckily for the fans, tomorrow will be a lot more optimistic. We get to preview week 13. We get to talk about the best top five and a whole lot more. And we get to talk about what we're thankful for, which is
Yeah.
being the Brickyard podcast.
Yeah, being the Brickyard podcast, and most importantly, while you wait for our much anticipated review of the movie Thanksgiving. We say this at the end of every show. Stay brick.
Stay break. I think we actually got that one. We got that down pat.
Yeah, sick. That was a good episode.